So, Bob, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in this morning. I know you're real busy. The first question is, you and I have been traveling the state this year talking about the dark web and identity theft and how to protect yourself. And one of the things I've heard you say is about the importance of freezing your credit. Could you just talk a little bit about why you think that's an important step to prevent this?
Absolutely. And Doug, thanks so much for having me on. And in the AG's office, we really appreciate the long partnership we've had with AARP as we've traveled the state, as you've said, and just appreciate all the great work that AARP does. Thanks to everybody who's joined the call as well. And yeah, to answer your question in a nutshell, I mean, freezing your credit can help prevent someone from stealing your identity. So it is a really useful tool that folks have to protect their personal information. And in the past, it's important to note that consumers had to pay in order to get that credit frozen. That's no longer the case. Washington State, the Washington State Legislature, thanks to the hard work of groups like AARP, the Washington State Legislature passed a law in this last legislative session that removed the fee for credit freezes effective June 7th of this year. So those are now free. There's also now a federal law that's passed as well, so it's free nationwide. This came in the wake of the Equifax data breach. Those are important changes for consumers. They no longer have to pay for those credit freezes.
Yeah, that's great. And so by freezing your credit, you essentially prevent part of this problem because people can no longer essentially open new accounts in your name.
That's exactly right.
Well, one of the things we did, as you know, because you were there for all this tour we did, was we did a survey in Washington State of Washingtonians. We asked them, how many of you have frozen your credit, as Bob said? And unfortunately, only 14% of Washingtonians have ever frozen their credit. So I think we have some work to do there. And hopefully it's not because, I think this bill that you're referring to where it's free now will help a lot. But that is a simple thing that you can do that will really help. If you're just joining us, my name is Doug Shadel from AARP, and you're listening to a TeleTown Hall with Attorney General Bob Ferguson. And we are discussing all kinds of stuff relating to identity theft. We already have almost 5,000 people on the phone line. And so I think maybe we should consider taking some questions. Let's see, we've got Alice from Port Orchard. You have a question for the Attorney General.
Hello?
Yes, Alice, do you have a question?
Well, there's always the tax scams or the scams on the internet and on people calling you. Like, for instance, they call me and tell me that I have to, they were the IRS and they're going to freeze all my accounts and blah, blah, blah. And I know better than to respond to that. But the thing is, if I don't answer the phone, they'll leave a number. How do I report that number?
So this is Bob Ferguson, Alice. Thank you so much for that call. So a couple things I'd say, and Doug probably wants to chime in as well. We receive in my office, the AG's office, about 20,000 consumer complaints a year. Those consumer complaints help us go after the bad actors and the scammers. And so if you've got a number that was left, you can simply write to my office, our Consumer Protection Division. In fact, I'll get that email here for you in a second and pass that on. But that's you can contact our office and say, hey, I received this call. It looks like a scam. Here's the number they left behind. But you can file, and anyone who's listening on any issue related to consumer protection can file a complaint with my Consumer Protection Division. And I just might also add on the IRS issue, as you know, it comes in many forms. Some people, if they can steal your identity, can literally file your IRS returns in your name. That happened to a member of my extended family, for example. So the consequences of having our identity stolen can be very real as well. Doug?
That's a good point. And I think it also doubles back to what we were just saying about freezing your credit. That's the thing you can do, and monitoring your accounts, which we're going to be talking about. And I know the IRS has really tried to work with the FBI and other federal agencies to stop this. But it's just another thing to be aware of, that the IRS is not going to call you if you do owe back taxes, right? And correct me if I'm wrong here, Bob, but they're not going to call you and ask you to go down to Walmart or some other place and get an iTunes card, which is a lot of times the way they ask people to pay for these back taxes. It's all a scam. There's an unprecedented number of robo-dialers out there now who are machines that automatically call you with this. And so if somebody calls you and says, I'm from the IRS, don't believe them.
And one more thing I'll add, if it's okay, Doug, is for Alice and others, I've got my phone number, the 1-800 number, and I'll try and repeat this later on as well, but the 1-800 number for my office And again, could just be for anything that's consumer related. If you have issues with consumer issues, but it's 1-800-551-4636. 1-800-551-4636. And Alice, I'll be repeating that a little bit later on as well.
How many calls do you get in a year? Or do you get a lot of complaints at the AG's office?
We receive more than 20,000 consumer complaints every single year, by email, by phone call, you name it. And that number, frankly, grows each year. Seniors are disproportionately represented. We hear a lot from seniors. But it does help us. Most of the cases that we bring, most of the investigations that we start in the office, Doug, as Doug knows, start from a consumer right into our office with a complaint, and my team looks into it, and that ends up with a lawsuit or litigation or investigation.
Right. Okay. Well, let's take another question. We've got Sadie from Spokane. Are you there? Sadie. Hello.
Yes.
You have a question?
How do we go about protecting ourselves when someone uses our credit card as a credit and it can go undetected? Is there any recourse?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we're going to be repeating this message over and over today, so thank you for that question. One of the key ways to avoid identity fraud and being victimized is to regularly monitor your credit card accounts. It sounds like, Sadie, you've already done that and you may have actually experienced this. But we did some surveying, like I said earlier this year, and too few people have online access to their credit card accounts. And so that's a real thing you can do to avoid this. If you do find that you have a fraudulent charge on your credit card, it's really important to immediately contact, in writing, your credit card company and notify them. Because if you do that within the first 60 days, then they must remove that charge, and then it's up to the credit card company and the bank to take care of it. I think this is another reason why we keep mentioning online monitoring. If it goes too long, it may be harder to recoup your losses. So the first step, I think, is to notify the credit card company and contest that charge. Bob, do you want to follow?
Yeah, and Sadie, this is Bob Ferguson. Just to add to that, to follow up on what Doug said is, if you ever had any issues with your credit card company, if you wrote to them, as Doug said, and for whatever reason they were not making you whole from that charge, contact my office. The credit card company should take care of that for you, as Doug said, if you do that within the 60 days, I think he mentioned. But for all the callers or the listeners, if you ever have a problem with that, with the credit card company not taking that charge off your credit card, that would be an appropriate time to call our office, that 1-800-551-4636 number. You can call our office and let us know, and we can try and help you out.
And what about people who say, well, how do I know you're going to do anything? I've talked about this for years on the road with you, but you have really ramped up the consumer protection aspect of your office. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit, and how many, I don't know if you call them prosecutors, assistant AGs you have working on these things? Sure.
So when I mentioned before that we receive about 20,000 consumer complaints a year, what my team does is we literally respond to every single one of those. Yeah. So if someone writes to us with a consumer complaint about a used car dealer, we write to that used car dealer and forward the complaint to the used car dealer and get a response from that dealer. So every single person who writes to us, we forward that complaint to the appropriate person. Let's say in Sadie's case, it's a credit card company that does not take that charge off her credit card. We would contact the credit card company.
Oh, really?
Every single time.
So they get a letter from the Attorney General's office?
Absolutely, every single time. And that often helps. As you might imagine, when a company gets a letter from my office saying we've received this complaint, if the company really did behave inappropriately, they often make the consumer whole without us having to do anything further. In fact, I forget the exact number, Doug, but it's many millions of dollars are returned to consumers through that simple step of us forwarding the complaint to the company that the consumer is complaining about without us doing anything further. Now, to your point about our office in general, yes, I've expanded our consumer protection division dramatically. These are the attorneys, the professional staff, the investigators who do this work. When I started as Attorney General, I think 5 years ago, I think we had about 10 attorneys doing that work. We now have 27, and all the addition of professional staff to support all of that work has been increased dramatically. Yeah. So that consumer protection division has grown dramatically to help meet the demands and the need that we see and that you see with AARP all around the state.
How could you do that? The state budget's not going up by that much. Are you just
no?
How does that work? I mean,
the good news for your listeners is, for my entire consumer protection division, the 80 or 90 folks who work there, there's no tax dollars supporting their salaries, their overhead, their office, nothing. All that comes from recoveries that we get from cases we brought. We may talk later on about a case against Uber, for example. That was a multi-million-dollar resolution.
Why don't you talk about that now? What is that? What was that?
So this Uber case was a case in which Uber had the information of their drivers, personal information of their drivers was hacked. That personal information was hacked. And what Uber did was they did not tell those millions of drivers around the country, 13,000 drivers in Washington State, that their personal information had been compromised. They kept it a secret for more than a year. You can't do that. Under Washington State law, thanks to a law that AARP worked with my office, we now require under Washington State law that if you're a company and the personal information of one of your customers is compromised, you must notify that customer within 45 days. Uber did not do that. We brought a lawsuit. The resolution was nearly $6 million. We send more than $2 million to those 13,000 drivers, and also we keep some resources to run our office. So there's, the way we've grown that Consumer Protection Division is by reinvesting some of our recoveries into growing the operation. We return millions back to consumers, millions back to the state. So consumer protection is that rare thing in state government, which is a moneymaker for the people and even for state government.
It almost operates like a private law firm in that sense.
In many senses it does, and that's true for our civil rights work, our antitrust work, but in this case for consumers, we've grown dramatically to meet the demand that you see every day, Doug, and that we see in our office as well.
That's great. If you're just joining us, my name is Doug Shadel, AARP State Director, and we're joined by Attorney General Bob Ferguson, and we're discussing how to protect your digital identity and avoid identity theft. Remember, if you'd like to pose a question to the Attorney General or to AARP about identity theft or any of the other issues we're talking about today, press *3 on your telephone keypad to be connected with an AARP staff member who will note your name and question. And I just want to give you a couple more data points about that survey we were mentioning earlier. I mentioned that only 14% have ever frozen their credit, but only 43% in our survey have online access to their bank accounts. And I think we just heard from some folks calling in about, well, what do I do if my credit card has a fraud charge on it? A lot can happen. I'd like your take on this, Bob. A lot can happen in that 30 days before your paper statement comes to you. How important is it to have that online access to your bank account to monitor your accounts?
Yeah, it's really critical because if you wait that 30 days, a bad actor, someone who's hacked into your credit card, can do a lot of damage to you from a financial standpoint in that time period. So monitoring in real time what's happening with your credit card statement so you know right away, as Sadie had that experience of saying, hey, someone is in there, someone's using my card, you can notify your credit card company and make sure it's not getting any worse. Wait 30 days, a lot of harm can happen in that time period.
Good. Let's go to Julie from Spokane Valley. Spokane Valley, right? Julie?
Okay, well, I had a comment and then a question.
Okay.
My comment is related directly to the thing you just said about how important online bank account access is.
Oh, well, good timing then.
And
go ahead.
My comment is I think that even if you're not interested in it, that you should sign up for it in a secure way so that no one else can go in and sign up for it.
That's a really good point. Yeah. We've heard of that from identity thieves who have actually taken over people's identity by creating their own online access to your bank account. Good point. Yep.
And then my next one is a little bit related to that. It has to do with the post office.
Uh-huh.
My brother had somebody forward his mail to somebody in Oregon. No, it was in Lacey. And so they went in and had all of his mail forwarded, unbeknownst to him. And even when he found out and had it changed back, it got changed again the next week.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the post office has some problems with that being done securely. And another thing is that we have something. And also my girlfriend had her ex-husband got all her mail sent to him, so he got all her tax stuff and lawyer documents and all that. But the other thing, too, is that there's also a pre-notification service that the post office does.
Yes, I've heard of that.
It's available where I get emails that show images of my mail that's coming in.
Yeah, that's right. I've heard of both of those, so I can take a shot at that. One is I know the post office is very aware of the mail forwarding problem, and they're trying to devise a solution to that with improving their forms. It is a problem. Identity thieves have used that as a tactic to direct mail if they've stolen someone's identity, so that the mail notifying them of all these breaches doesn't come to the victim, and they're working on that. The pre-notification service, and I think you can go online and sign up for that with the U.S. Post Office, is a great idea, because if you're still getting a lot of mail, you're getting a lot of paper statements, it'll essentially tell you the day before or the day of what mail is supposed to arrive in your mailbox. And then when you get your mail, you can compare that to the mail you actually got, and if something's missing. Because we've had identity thieves tell us in the past that when they steal mail from mailboxes that are unlocked, which is another thing, you should lock your mailbox, that they don't steal all the mail. They'll just steal a bank statement and leave the rest there, so you can't really tell if they've stolen any of your mail. So this pre-notification that you're talking about is really a very good deterrent. Bob, did you want to make any comments?
The only thing I'll add is I appreciate you mentioning that, because that is, in our office, I know my team has mentioned we've had a growing number of complaints on exactly that issue of mail being forwarded. So appreciate you calling that to everyone's attention who's listening in, and it is a growing problem.
Yeah. Let's take another call. Are you okay with taking another call?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Paul from Pullman. I'm sorry, Jerry from Pullman.
Hello?
Jerry,
Yes?
go ahead.
Okay, I have actually two questions. The first one was, a lot of times if you're on the internet, there'll be these things, the ads that pop up in between, and they'll say, take this survey, and you'll get a chance, or you could win a gift card or anything like that. And a lot of times I've gone all the way through and done it, and then at the end they start wanting too much personal information, so then I just erase everything and back out completely. I'd like to know how safe that is, or if it should be you should do it at all.
I think you should not do it at all.
And I would. This is Bob Ferguson, Jerry, and I would say that if something seems too good to be true, hey, you've won something, a lottery, whatever it might be. If it feels too good to be true, it probably is. I will say, I'm really glad you did not go all the way through and provide, as I think you were saying, when they're asking for too much personal information, you said, you know what, I'm going to stop right here, and that was you had the right instinct. You just don't give out that personal information over the internet or in any way unless you're absolutely sure you know who's on the receiving end of that. So you did the right thing, but in general, I can just tell you my practice is I don't go down that rabbit hole at all. If I see anything like that, I just don't start that process. Nothing good will come out of it. So you did the right thing.
Okay. You talked about freezing accounts. How do you do that?
And in fact, when I pose this is Bob, I'm going to pose that to Doug as well by saying, hey, when's the right time to freeze your account? When should you freeze your account, Doug?
Yeah. So two-part answer. One is, are you an AARP member? Oh, she's gone.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I can't. Anyway, just last month, I think, in the AARP magazine, there's a column in there by me about how to freeze your credit.
And I'm sure everybody listening has read that column. I'm sure
they've already memorized it, and so that's really a moot point, right? And when should you freeze your credit? Immediately. I mean, just don't wait for. Is that what?
Yeah, what warning signs, what red flags need to happen for someone to take that step?
I don't think you need a red flag or a warning sign to freeze your credit. I froze my credit and didn't have any warning signs, and it's just a good thing to do. And by freezing your credit doesn't mean you can't borrow money. You can thaw your credit, and because of the work of the AGs, Bob really led that charge. What was it, last year? No, it was this year.
This year, 2018.
To make it free. It used to be $10 to freeze it, $10 to thaw it. It was really complicated. Now it's free, and it's not as difficult. And I would do it regardless of the red flags, in the absence of red flags.
And that's the important point, is I think in talking to folks, people think they need to wait for something bad to happen before they freeze it. But just so folks who are listening are clear, what Doug is saying is, hey, you don't have to wait for some warning sign, because you can now freeze and then unfreeze it without any cost. So if you need it to draw on your credit, you can unfreeze it, there's no cost. But in the meantime, you're safe by having it frozen.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, we solved that problem.
There we go.
Blanche from Prosser. You're on the line with the Attorney General.
All right, I have a question about several calls I get all day long about my good credit, and they're going to lower my interest rate. And now I get one, I have a 0% interest rate. say push the number 1 to talk to them. Well, I never talked to them. This time, I'm so sick of it. I pushed the thing to see what they said. I said, well, to get a lower interest rate or zero interest rate, you'll have to have all my credit card numbers, and I'm not giving them to you, and I hung up.
Beautiful.
Good for you, Blanche. That's the right way to do it. And I know it's annoying to get those calls, but you're doing the right thing by just ignoring them, hanging up. That is the right approach.
Yeah, I mean, that call is essentially what we refer to as a phishing call, P-H-I-S-H. Don't ask me why it's called phishing, but they're trolling for or trying to lure you, if we want to use the phishing analogy, into giving personal information. And Blanche obviously sniffed that out ahead of time. There's just so much, the robodial calls that are coming in are just overwhelming now, and it's good to just ignore all of them. How about Jacob? Jacob from Vancouver.
Well, hello. I just was listening, and you answered my questions in the last 2 people you've talked to.
Oh, good.
One of them was with all the phone calls that we receive, and they're all different numbers. Each number it changes and it varies, and sometimes they just call and don't answer at all, so you just hang up on them. We know exactly what they're trying to do, and the freezing your credit. I had the question about how you went about doing it, but I see that you can just freeze your credit and then you can open it up at any time, so it's not a problem.
That's exactly right, Jacob. And one thing I'll mention that maybe I'll ask Doug to expand on a bit is, on those phone calls, which are so annoying and frustrating, the folks who are phishing, the term that Doug used, they can use technology to make those phone calls seem more inviting. They can use, for example, a local area code, right, Doug? Even if they're calling from somewhere else, they can have a local area code. Maybe you could chat about that, which sort of deceives you into thinking maybe it's someone in your neighborhood calling you up.
Yeah. I don't know if any of it on the line here, and by the way, we have over 7,500 people on the line, so this is obviously a hot topic. Yeah, it's neighbor spoofing is the term for it, and these robodialers are finding people aren't picking up when they've got a caller ID and it says an 800 number or from Florida or something. But they can make the return phone call, the call of origin, look like any number they want. So your caller ID display is sort of pointless. It doesn't tell you who's calling. And I've gotten these calls on my phone where it's like my area code and my prefix.
Wow.
So I don't know who the number is. I don't recognize the number, but it must be a neighbor because it's close to my number. They increase their pickup rate by 30% when they do that. But it's still a scammer or a robo-dialer. So the best thing to do is to get some kind of a robo-blocking service or to just let it go to voicemail. We're going to do something now, and everybody on the line can participate. Before I get to that, if you have a question for the Attorney General, you can press *3 on your keypad now, and you'll be connected to an AARP staff person who can take your question. So press *3 if you want to ask us a question, although the screen here is filled with questions. Bruce, do we really need
We always need more.
For those of you who are interested, we're going to do a survey of the people on the call now, and it's very simple for you to participate. The way you vote is simple. I'll give you choices. I'll give you a question and some choices associated with the numbers on your keypad. So simply press the number on your telephone keypad that corresponds to your answer. So press 1 if your answer is 1, press 2 if it's 2. And here's the question. Have you ever contacted the credit bureaus to freeze your credit? Press 1 on your keypad if yes, I have done that. Press 2 on your keypad if the answer is no, I haven't frozen my credit. And press 3 on your keypad if you're not sure. So the question is, have you ever contacted the credit bureaus to freeze your credit? Press 1 if the answer is yes. Press 2 if the answer is no, and 3 if you're not sure. And we will be giving you the results of that. We have a couple more we're going to try and get to today if we have time. But with so many people calling in, I'm not sure we're going to get to all of those questions. So should we take another one here? Should we take, let's see, Alice? Alice from Port Orchard.
Well, I just looked through my AARP, the last one that I got, and I still can't find how do you freeze your credit.
Oh, you can't? Do you get the magazine?
Yes.
I think it's not. I think it's not. I think it may be the last issue, not this issue. We'll look that up and see if we can get you the exact month of when that is.
All right.
I know it's in there though. So
Is it possible?
Sorry, well,
Apologies for that.
we accidentally cut her off.
Apologies for cutting you off there, Alice.
Okay, let's go to Crystal in Federal Way. Tom, sorry, Tom. Tom.
Hi. My question is, our mobile phone gives us a number sometimes that says scam likely. Our CenturyLink phone never does anything like that, and that's where we get most of our ignored scam type call numbers.
Yeah.
Is there any way that the phone company or the CenturyLink can give us that same service that T-Mobile does? And is there any way to have all phone companies get more involved in blocking down robocalls that are unwanted?
Good question. Good question. My understanding is that when the service says scam possible, a lot of these companies are either themselves or doing this or using a third party, where they're developing essentially a blacklist of robocalls. And then when somebody calls you, if the incoming call number is compared to that blacklist of numbers, and if it matches, some companies will say this is a probable scam, or other services will just block it to begin with. Companies like Nomo Robo will just block it. So you can hire a service. There are multiple call blocking services now that will block 98% of the robodials that are out there, or you could just call your service provider if they're not doing this now and say, hey, what are you doing about blocking robodials? I don't know, Bob, if you have any thoughts about that.
No, I think that's right, and that is interesting that, hey, you're saying some companies do have this system, others do not. So what I'll do is, Tom, I'll check back with my team and see if there's anything further on my side of the equation, on the Attorney General side, if there's anything we can do to make sure that is something provided across the board.
Okay, good. Let's see, Evadine? Evadine, are you there?
Yes.
Go ahead. You have a question?
I don't have a credit card, but I was wondering about debit cards. How does this affect debit card?
How does it affect debit cards? Well, that we had mentioned previously that if you have a credit card, for years I've been telling people, use a credit card if you're buying things on the internet, just because you have this federal protection for all but the $50 if you notify them of a fraudulent charge in the first 60 days. And it used to be that debit cards didn't have sort of any protection and you were much more vulnerable. Now there is some protection for if you notify somebody of a fraudulent charge on your debit card, there are limits to what the scammer can take off your debit card. I still personally believe that a credit card is safer to use than a debit card, but there's some people who can't establish credit. Low-income people can't get a credit card, and so the only thing they can use, and I'm not saying this is true for you, Ibadine, but a lot of people, my daughter has a debit card. I mean, she can't establish credit.
And Doug, does it apply? So I don't have a debit. This is Bob, by the way. I don't have a debit card myself, and but with the advice you gave earlier about kind of monitoring your credit card, right? Having online account and monitoring that sort of day to day, so you know if someone's using it. Would that apply to a debit card as well?
Absolutely right. That's a good point. And let's just reiterate that. Remember, the survey found that only 4 in 10 people in the state of Washington have online access. If you don't have online access to your debit accounts and credit card accounts, get them, because a lot, as the Attorney General said earlier, a lot can happen in that 30-day period between the time you get statements.
So that applies for your debit card as well as your credit card, it sounds like,
yes,
Doug.
Yes.
Great.
Sharon. Hello, Sharon?
Yeah, I have a question. You've talked about freezing the credit on our accounts, but I don't know how to go about doing it. And also our kids' accounts, I've heard that we should do it for our children. And this robo-blocking service, how do we sign up for that? And also PayPal, they save your credit card number. Is that a safe thing?
That's quite a few questions in a row. How do you freeze your credit? Was that one of your questions?
Yes, that was the first one, yes.
Okay. So the short answer, for those of you who don't want to read my article I spent a lot of time on that article, though. You should read that article.
What's the title of your article?
The Big Freeze. The Big Freeze.
And that was in the last issue.
Yeah, okay. The last issue. How can we freeze our credit and our children's credit? And you raise a good point about children's credit. So the short answer is you contact each of the 3 major credit bureaus. There's more than 3 credit bureaus, but 98% of it is these three credit bureaus, the TransUnion, Equifax, and what's the third one? TransUnion, Equifax,
Experian?
and Experian.
Good work.
You contact them and you tell them you want to freeze your credit. They will run you through a series of questions to make sure it's you, and then you will end up with a 9-digit PIN number that you need to save, because the next time you go into your account, if you don't have that PIN number, they won't give you access. And this is how you shield yourself from all the bad guys who might be trying to get into your account, because you've got this sort of unbreakable code now. That's how you do it. The question of freezing your credit for children, that is actually a really important point. Freeze your children's credit. There are a lot of bad guys who will go out there and they'll steal the identity of a 5-year-old thinking nobody's watching, and they aren't watching. So, and you do it the same way. You can do that on behalf of your children by contacting the credit bureaus in the same way. You get a separate PIN number for the child, and that's how you do this.
Hey, Douglas, before you go to that next part of that question, your article, The Big Freeze, is that available online on the AARP website as well?
Well, I'm glad you
asked. You got it right there.
I just got a note saying that we will post that on our website, which is aarp.org/WA. And so you can just go to our website to get the Big Freeze.
And what we'll do for the listeners on my website as well, on the Office Attorney General website, we'll get a copy of that. I think I need to read the Big Freeze, and we'll post it on our website as well and get that up as well for folks.
So survey results, it looks like 18% of you have frozen your credit and 77% have not, which is a higher rate. Still could be improved, but a higher rate than other folks.
And Doug, on the question, I think it was Sharon. I hope I have the name right, Sharon. She was asking about PayPal, I think. And I think she was asking if that was safe, maybe. Yeah.
For years, cybersecurity experts have said that the bad guys have been going after these pay services for years, and PayPal's one of them that they've been going after. But they have also seriously beefed up their security. The reason you'd use one of those pay services is because otherwise, when you go to buy stuff, you're putting your credit card all over the internet. So the idea is you give one entity, like a pay service, your credit card number, and don't give them a debit card number or a checking account number in case it is hacked. Much safer to give them a credit card number. Then when you go to pay for something else on the internet using that PayPal service, it's only in one place. So is it theoretically possible they could be hacked? Yes. But at least you're not, putting your credit card on 30 different places to buy stuff.
And is it fair to say there's no perfectly safe system in this world these days, but that's why doing these things like monitoring your accounts, making sure good passwords, that type of thing is so important?
It's a really good question. It's the path of least resistance. We've interviewed a lot of these bad guys. We interviewed a guy named Brett Johnson. And by the way, for those of you who are AARP members, and there's 7,700 people in this call now. There is a story in the bulletin about this guy, Brett Johnson, who we profiled and who was actually we remember him because we were showing videos of him. Yep. And this is the thing he said. He's one of the first guys on the dark web. He's stole $60 million from people, and he's now cooperating with law enforcement. And he says, criminals are lazy. And if you do anything like online access, freezing your credit, you're going to be far less likely to be victimized, because I'm not going to bother with you. What do you mean you've frozen your credit? There's too many people who haven't. And so
there's easier targets.
Right, so put up any resistance at all, and you're probably going to be significantly safer. More questions? They just keep coming. The hits just keep coming. How about Arthur? Or no, Eva. Eva?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead. You have a question?
Sure. Yes. A number of years ago, my spouse was targeted by the people claiming to be from Windows, that there was a problem with his computer. That was resolved, but not after a lot of anguish on his part. But people continue to call us, sometimes several calls a day. And I'm wondering, is there any way to stop this? Because I realize that they don't use legitimate phone numbers.
Hey, Doug, you want to take a shot?
What you're describing is, we were talking about robodialers earlier. This is still just a massive problem. And we've been, Microsoft was traveling with us this year on the stump, and it is a real problem. Someone will call you and they'll say, we're from Microsoft or Apple, and there's a problem with your computer. Press 1 and you can talk to a technician right now. You press 1, and the first thing they're going to try and get you to do is to say, that's right, we're from Microsoft, and we want to take over your computer. So go to your screen, I'll lead you to this website, helpme.org or whatever it is, and they ask you to put your name in, and then they'll give you a code that's supposedly their staff code or their personnel code or something. You don't want to do that. You don't want anyone ever to take over your computer remotely unless you've initiated the contact independently. Because what happens is they'll either put malware onto your computer, because now they have access to it, or in some cases they'll just steal all your passwords and take over all of your accounts. The more benign version of that is, yes, we see there's a problem, and for $299 we can fix it remotely, and they're in and out for the $299. But as this caller said, now you're on the list. They'll keep calling you back because you sort of fell for it. And so the prevention message here is if you see a pop-up on your computer that says I've got a virus, or somebody calls you and says you have a virus, these computer companies don't do that. If you're worried about it, independently contact the Microsoft Store, the Apple Store, but don't respond ever to these on the internet.
And I don't think there's much for me to add to that, Doug, but we do see these tech support scams, we often call them, where, hey, it says, do you have is your computer operating in a slow fashion? So you reach out, and these ads look legitimate. These bad actors will even use the name of Microsoft in their advertising to make it look like they are Microsoft's trusted source for tech support. As Doug said, just don't ever let anyone remotely get into your computer. We see this over and over again. We've had litigation around this.
That's right.
Yeah,
you've sued several of these
We
companies.
have, and had some good outcomes. Shut down a big one, for example, but it can be a real challenge. Often those entities are not in the United States, they're overseas, and it can be hard for us on the law enforcement side to go after them. So the key is just don't let anyone remotely access your computer. Don't give them that access. Bad things are going to happen.
Yeah. Okay, it's time for another quick question, don't you think? Another survey question? You guys ready for a survey question?
Let's do it.
Here's the question, and remember, you're going to use your keypad to answer. Have you ever had your identity compromised or seen a fraudulent charge on your credit card? Press 1 on your keypad for yes, I have had my identity compromised or fraudulent charge. Press 2 on your keypad if the answer is no, and press 3 if the answer is not sure.
So what's the question again?
The question is, have you ever had your identity compromised or seen a fraudulent charge on your credit card?
Got it.
Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, and then we will give you the results momentarily. How are we doing on time here? We're coming up on the end. What's that?
43 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
15 minutes left.
Let's see. You want to do that one?
Sure.
Okay. Gail, go ahead.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Oh, is there two Gales? All right. I'm getting a new phone call that says that I am using my computer illegally, and if I don't stop it, they are going to report me, and and they're also going to just turn my machine off so I can't use it. Have you heard this new thing, or?
How did you get that message?
By phone, and I still got the phone number.
Yeah.
It came from New York.
Maybe. That's the problem.
Right.
You don't really know where it came. Well,
Yeah.
you just never know where it comes from because they can, as we said before, they can spoof the number. But Bob, is that a good thing to pursue, or I mean?
So two things, Gail. So number one is you already suspect, and you and I have never met, but I'm pretty confident you are not operating your computer illegally. So this is classic.
No.
This is classic phishing, the term that Doug used earlier, where they're trying to get you to do something, give them information. So your instincts are right that this is a scam. So to ignore it and hang up. If you are willing and able to provide that phone number to my team, that is a big help. And you can call my office at that 1-800 number that I mentioned before, which is 1-800-551-4636, 551-4636, and pass that number on to my team. That's always helpful for my team to see what we can do to help. But the main thing is prevention. And when you get a call like that, your instincts are right, Gail, to say, hey, this is a scam, I'm not going to do it, and just hang up on them.
One of the things we've noticed, just parenthetically, is that a lot of the robodials, a lot of these approaches are fear-based approaches. You think about the IRS scam.
That's true.
You owe money or you're going to jail. The jury duty scam, which we haven't talked about. You've missed jury duty. Microsoft tech support scam, there's something wrong with your computer. These are all trying to get at the fear we live in our culture now, where people are just worried about something bad happening.
And they want to get you in that heightened emotional state that I've heard Doug talk about as we travel the state, to make you feel like you need to act quickly without taking the time to, hey, talk to a trusted friend or to check with a legitimate company like Microsoft to see if it's real. And those are the things you should do. Is if you see this going on, just slow the process down. Do not provide that personal information online or over the phone.
Right. Well, we have the results in it from our second survey question. It looks like 56% of the people on the phone line now have had some kind of their identity compromised or a fraudulent charge. 39% no, 5% not sure. So that's over half.
I'd be a yes on that one as well. My family certainly has.
So all the more reason to just keep reiterating our prevention points here on the online monitoring of the accounts. How do you know that you have a fraudulent charge? Well, you've got to watch those accounts and monitor them every day. I monitor my credit card. I have one credit card and one checking account. I monitor them once a day. I just go in online. And, for years, my son would tell me, this goes back 5-10 years. He goes, how come you don't have any online access? I'm like, I don't want to. I'm afraid that's going to make it easier for people to scam me if I'm on the internet and I give them my account number. The reality is it makes it easier if you're not. Our guy Brett, remember him saying this? It's like the reason we target seniors on the dark web and he looked for people who were over the age of 60 to steal their identity because he knows this data. He knows that people aren't doing the monitoring. So it actually makes you more vulnerable, not less. Let's see, another call. Eileen.
I believe that may be me. And I'm wanting to know, I've heard from different people, that if you answer your phone and you just give them your name, that they can be actually taping that name. And so I usually try to, when they ask me if this is Eileen House, instead of saying yes, which they say they can use that yes for other reasons, to just say this is she. And I'm wondering if that's actually the true statement on the fact that they could actually be taping your voice and using your answer, just saying who you are, to use that for something else.
Let me take that.
Go for it.
Yeah, we've heard that too. I actually, honestly, haven't ever heard of an example where just saying the word yes is successfully used as a verification. Because what they're getting at there is, is this a verification that you have ordered whatever they say you've ordered? And I think just saying the word yes, I'm not the Attorney General's office, but that seems like that would be a tough sell to say, oh, here's the word yes. And I've never really heard of anybody being victimized by that. But I think the broader point is to just not engage at all in these calls. Don't even answer the phone at all if you're pretty sure it's a telemarketer. Because the greater danger is that they will wrap you into a conversation which will lead to you actually doing something like ordering something.
I think that's exactly right. So for me with my phone, if I do not know the number calling, if a name doesn't come up, like Doug's name, where I know who's calling me, I just let it go to voicemail. And I just check the message later on and decide if I want to call back. Often it's some weird recorded thing and I know it was a scam call and I can just delete it. But that's just my philosophy. If I do not recognize the number, I'm just not answering the phone. And so Doug is right. So we also haven't seen, I don't think, I'll check with my team, Eileen, but I don't think we've seen an actual problem of someone saying yes and that being used against them. I'll check with the team on that, but I'm not aware of that actually happening.
Well, we're going to go to the last polling question because we're starting to run out of time here. And again, I just want to thank you, Bob, for taking a whole hour here out of your day to
happy to do, and appreciate all the folks, more than 7,000 people I think you said are on this call. I really appreciate everybody joining in. And one thing I'll just add is if folks can pass on the information they learned today to their friends, to their loved ones, that's how this prevention is the best protection. So we appreciate you taking time to be on the call, but hey, when you're seeing a friend over dinner or having coffee, pass it on to them as well.
That's really good. The final survey question, and again, get out your keypad on your phone, is have you ever received a notice from a vendor or somebody you've done business with that your personal information has been compromised? So we've been talking all hour about data breaches. Have you ever been notified there's a data breach involving your personal information? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no, press 3 for you're not sure. Have you ever received a notice from a vendor that your personal information has been compromised? So that's the last polling question.
And 1 is a yes and 2 is a no.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Let's see. Thomas. Go ahead, Thomas.
Yes. I would like to know how we can protect our Social Security numbers when we are asked to give so much of that to various businesses.
Yeah.
Legitimate businesses.
Yeah. Well, this is a good question, and you're not going to want to hear what Brett Johnson told us about Social Security numbers. That some of them are in fact for sale on the dark web. But okay, so the first thing is, I think we had members from the Social Security Administration with us this summer, didn't we? Going to mysocialsecurity.gov, I think is the website, and establishing a relationship with your Social Security account is really important. Someone earlier said, well, if I don't establish the relationship with my credit card company, someone else might. And this is what the Social Security folks are saying. If you haven't set up an online access to your Social Security account, mysocialsecurity.gov, you ought to do that. Does that guarantee that somebody can't misuse your Social Security number? No, it doesn't. The broader question, which may be a little sticky, is, I just personally anymore, if somebody requires my Social Security number to do business with them, I don't do business with them. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know if that's legal or if they can legally, I don't think they can legally require me to give my Social Security number. It's just a policy that I have. But the other broader thing is your Social Security number and all of your personal information is actually already out there. Brett Johnson showed us a website on the dark web that claims to have 170 million Social Security numbers on it, and I didn't believe him. And then he looked up my wife and found my wife's Social Security number on there for $2.99. So you could freak out about that and say, oh my God, all the information's out there, we might as well give up. Or you can say, again, this path of least resistance. There are things you can do. And as we wrap up here, I just want to give the final poll numbers and then wrap up with go over our 3 tips, if you wouldn't mind running us down those. The last polling question, 53% of you said that you have been notified that there was some kind of a data breach, 35% no. So more than half have had a credit card fraud charge on their account, and more than half have had some kind of a data breach notification. So this is very real to the people on the phone and to people in the state of Washington. How much time do we have here? Are we good? Should we take another question? Do we have time for another question?
One more quick
Okay,
one.
we'll do one more question and then we'll try and wrap it up. Go ahead. We've got Darren. Darren, are you there?
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. My first question is, how do we verify that our credit is frozen? Because I contacted Experian, and after 2 hours of waiting on hold, etc., I was able to establish it, but I have no idea that they actually did it. I also applied for their trusted ID because they were hacked and lost my information, all of it, and so they offered trusted ID Premier for free. I signed up, but I've had no communication with them, so I don't know whether they did it or not.
Yeah. This is I don't know, Bob. This sounds like you might have a complaint. Yeah. That you can file with the AGs. Really, they should be more responsive to this. This is we believe they have a responsibility with millions and millions of people's personal information to protect it, and then especially when you go to the trouble of trying to freeze your credit. Did they ever give you a 9-digit PIN number, Darren, when you tried to freeze your credit? Did you ever get one of those?
All I've got is my logon number. Let me see, 36.
Don't give us your logon number.
You don't need to give it out. You don't need to give it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't give it. Yeah. But it's over 10 digits.
Okay, that may be your PIN number, but if they are unresponsive to you, I would file a complaint against Experian with the Attorney General's office.
And again, the number you can call my office, Darren, is that 1-800-551-4636, 551-4636, and that'll connect you to a person in my office.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're nearing the end here, Bob, and I want to just throw it back to you to go over the tips we've been talking about. You know, just given all that we've talked about and the fact that we live in this post-prevention world, what are the things people should keep in mind to avoid identity theft?
Sure, and thanks again, Doug, for having me. And just three quick tips to recap. One we talked a lot about and start with security freezes. You can put a security freeze in place with the 3 credit reporting bureaus. That is now free. You should do that. Don't wait for red flags or problems. You can do that because you can unfreeze it anytime you want, and that's also free. We saw, I think today, 18% of people said they'd done that. We really want to get that number up. So that'd be number one. Number two, we talked a lot about setting up an online access for any of your financial accounts so you can regularly monitor what's going on. Doug said he does that every single day. That way you're not waiting until a statement comes in a month and checking it then. It may be too late. A lot of damage may be done. Right. So set up that online access to any financial account. And third, we didn't talk about it too much today, but really important is to make sure you use unique passwords for each of your online accounts. So that way if someone does access one of your accounts, they can't use that same password to access other accounts as well.
That's really a good point. On that last point, I just want to amplify, you know, a good way to manage, I have a lot of accounts. I have a password manager, and this is, you know, a program that you can download that safely manages your passwords. Now, people say, well, what if somebody can hack into that? Yes, it's possible. You got to trust somebody. There are really legitimate password managing companies, and they will even create difficult to break passwords for you if you're having trouble coming up with those passwords. Good. Well, any final thought? Bob, you've given us your final thoughts. I just want to say thank you again to the Attorney General and to the over 7,500 people who are on this call today. You know, we live in a complicated world with a lot of stuff going on, but there are, as we've tried to point out, simple things that you can do to prevent yourself from being defrauded. And again, if you want more information about this, you can go to AARP at www.aarp.org/WA for all the latest stuff. The Attorney General's office also has a really good website. I think everything that's on our website is on your website and vice versa, but that's www.atg.wa.gov. And again, that number, Bob's given it several times, but let me give it to you, for complaints with the AG's office is 1-800-551-4636. And again, Bob, thank you so much, and thank you all for listening. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.